think we're about to start. Can you hear me now? Yes. So good afternoon. My name is Antonio Perlot. On behalf of ASEM, would like to welcome you, those in the room. Thanks for joining. And those online. So we have quite a big audience online following this event, which we are very happy to organize again here after last year's event on the general, I would say, overall Vision 2030 plus of the industry about sustainable mobility. This year we are glad to engage with you in a discussion, an exchange about the vision of the industry for decarbonization. So a topic I think by now we are all very much familiar with. I think there's so much we can say about recent COP conferences, the file on cars and vans, which has been through the parliament. So these are all elements that are in the background of our discussion. Even though they do not really strictly impact the sector, we thought it was a good opportunity to engage with you in this discussion, to basically tell you what we've been developing over the last couple of years, this vision 2030 plus, and in particular the decarbonization angle. So I think in a nutshell, before I leave the floor to the President of ASEM to provide you with I would say, a welcome address, and then to Mr. Gluck for his keynote. Clearly, we're looking at this discussion on decarbonization as a challenge, clearly, on overall mobility and society, but also as opportunities to think in a different way about how people move and also how people are organizing mobility. And obviously, we do see our vehicles playing a role today and continuing playing a role in the future, and this is what we want to present to you today. So I would like, before I leave the floor to our president, simply mention that we will have the pleasure also of having Aled Walker from Deloitte moderating again our event as you did last year. So hopefully keeping us, I would say, focused and on the ball. No parallel made with the football club, obviously. But making sure that we are able to talk about all the aspects that we want to discuss today and engage also with you in the audience and also those at home. There will be a Q&A also for allowing further interaction. So without further ado, I'd like to leave the floor to Michele Colanino, our president of ASEM, to deliver the welcome speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our ASEM conference. This is the motorcycle industry vision for decarbonization. I am delighted that you are here today and that many others are joining us online for this second web streamed conference. So thank you very much. I also want to thank our panelists. We'll discuss both the present and the future of motorcycling and what our industry will do to support the EU in achieving zero emissions by 2030. But before our panel discussion begins, I would like to quickly set the scene by telling you about the current situation. You know that the European motorcycling industry is a complex ecosystem that brings together many companies, from multinational ones to SMEs. The largest companies in the sector represented in ASEM operate 40 manufacturing sites and 35 R&D centers across Europe. In addition, there are many manufacturers of parts and components, personal protective equipment, engineering companies, sport organizations, and more. This industrial complex generates jobs for approximately 400,000 people, and it contributes for about 21 billion to GDP across Europe every year. In terms of vehicle use, as you can see in the charts here, there are approximately 40 million of two-wheelers on Europe's roads today. And every year, about 1.5 million of motorcycles or mopeds are sold in the European Union. Our sectors have recovered well from the pandemic situation of 19. This is not surprising because our vehicles fulfill important social functions such as urban mobility, leisure riding, and last-mile logistics. We expect the number of two-wheelers in Europe to continue increasing in the coming years as the population of European cities grows. Vehicles produced by ASEM members can play an increasingly important role, contributing to reduce congestion and helping cities to meet their climate objectives. These are positive words, but this doesn't mean the future is short of challenges. Indeed, seeking to look beyond the pandemic, the current geopolitical situation has significantly affected the European economy. Nobody knows that today's energy prices are a concern for manufacturing companies. Some are more affected than others, but the situation is difficult for all of us. Energy is an essential input in an industrial process. The European industry needs affordable energy, and we also need predictable prices. In a sense, the current crisis is more complex than the one we faced during the 19 pandemic. During the lockdowns, every sector has been affected. But now we are facing challenges that will affect the long-term competitiveness of the industry. Another source of concern is access to raw material and critical components, such as microchips. These issues will become increasingly important in the future as we increase the production of more advanced and complex vehicles, including electric ones. Raw materials come mostly from outside the European Union. If we do not put in place fair counter-actions, the dependency from these regions will increase significantly. European institutions are aware of that and are working to strengthen the EU value chain in strategic segments. By way of example, the principle behind the new battery regulation to increase the availability of raw materials through reuse and recycling goes in that direction, and we support it. These are areas where the European Commission and our elected political leaders must continue working to find effective and long-term solutions. On long-term sustainability and decarbonization, the recently concluded car and van CO2 European legislation has created a lot of debate. Although the motorcycle sector is not covered by such legislation, and I have to say it counts for less than 1% in total emission in European Union countries, we have engaged with ASEM a proactive reflection within our Vision 2030. COP27 has put the topic of a just transition further into focus how to deliver on decarbonization, ensuring mobility for all, competitiveness, as well as a future for next generations. We believe that in the future, the motorcycle sector will combine innovative technologies such as electric powertrains, e-fuel and hydrogen-powered vehicles. Other technology solutions may be developed as we move ahead. Our industry strongly supports the principle of technological neutrality to drive down CO2 emissions cost effectively and in line with the EU's Green Deal objectives. Nobody doubts that electric vehicles can and will play a role in the mobility of the future. Indeed, electromobility is a key component of ASEM's Vision 2030. Let me say, I repeat, is not the only one. But it's also true that the current battery technology is not well suited for some specific segments. For example, leisure-oriented vehicles, which cover long distances. To solve this problem, we see advanced synthetic fuel being a great help. They are a perfect transition solution for vehicles for which electrification remains technically challenging, on top of the positive role they can play in decarbonizing the existing vehicle fleet. Swappable batteries are another promising technology. It is a top priority for our sector, and we are working on this within our Swappable Batteries Motorcycle Consortium. Our panelists will probably touch upon this too. As you can see, our industry is proactively taking action to reduce CO2 emissions. We are addressing these from different technologies angles. We are ready to work on our vehicles, developing new technologies, and playing our role in the decarbonization process. So technology is not an issue for ASEM's producer. But we also need policymakers to create an environment that makes the transition possible without putting companies and jobs at risk. This is another crucial aspect that we have to consider. On a general level, it is essential to understand that the motorcycle industry is not the car industry. There are substantial differences in manufacturing scale, R&D capabilities, and maturity of technology. I repeat, we are responsible for less than 1% of the total emission in Europe, and I think all over the world. Our sector will progressively lower its CO2 emissions, which are already low in essence. Our vehicles are light, efficient, and therefore frugal when it comes to energy needs. But to keep the required technology affordable for citizens, we need a reasonable time to continue to deliver on decarbonization. I'm sure, the European Commission fully appreciates this. On electromobility, there is today one key challenge: charging infrastructure. Europe also needs to address this issue on sufficient charging infrastructure, and I would say urgently. We need charging stations not just in a few wealthy countries, but across the whole European Union. And those charging stations must service both cars and motorcycles. This is essential to increase the market uptake of electric two-wheelers. The transition to electric vehicles will also need different forms of financial support. Intelligent taxation and well-designed financial incentives will play an important role here, even if it is not the solution. As you can see, the good news is that positive change is possible, but we will need strong cooperation and commitment from both industry leaders and policy makers. I'm sure we will come back to many of these points with the next discussions with our fellow discussion with the panelists. To conclude, I just want to thank you and not, taking other time for your attention, and hope we'll enjoy today's discussion. I will give the floor now to Andreas Gluck, member of the European Parliament, who will tell us how he and his institution see decarbonization and the role that two-wheelers can play in supporting sustainable mobility in Europe. Mr. Gluck, the floor is yours. And thank you, everybody, again, for being here today with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
President Colonino, ladies and gentlemen, first I have to admit that I feel very comfortable here, because this event here combines two of my favorite things. First of all, one of my favorite things is politics, of course. And another one of my favorite things is riding my motorcycle. And I do that already for years, so I feel very, very comfortable here. And thank you very much for the invitation. We are all here because we want to decarbonize the transport sector, and we want to ride our motorcycles. Right now, when you take a look in politics and when you take a look at this parliament, there are two camps. Like, one camp is the one which wants to regulate or over-regulate by picking certain technologies and banning others. It is like having your favorite children of technology and your stepchildren of technology. That politics defines the one is good, the other one isn't. And there is like this other camp which wants to create a framework to intensify the decarbonization of our economy. So you can already kind of hear that I'm on the side of technological neutrality. I belong to the second camp, because I am convinced if you have technology or technological neutrality, then we don't only seek for the best solutions, but for the best and cheapest solutions. And this means, in general, not only transport sector. And this means that if we have the best and cheapest solutions, they can take place anywhere in the world. It will happen also in third countries. And I believe this is really good if you want to save the climate. It's a necessity. And it is also good for our jobs in the European Union. And after all, it is not politicians who can decide which is the best technology or not. Most of us are no scientists. We don't work in research and development departments. So I believe the best thing we can do is we can create a framework. And in this framework, It is your companies which can find the best solutions. And we have one of those tools. It is called ETS. We already have the European trading system for CO2 emissions. And we want to extend this to the transport sector. And then, of course, motorcycle sector is also part of the ETS. So it's still in the trialogue. We still don't know the outcome yet. We still don't know whether there's a difference between private vehicles and business vehicles. But I hope that it is possible to organize the transport sector also with the ETS, because it has proven itself that it is a tool which works. Because the alternative would be something I call a politic of bans. And I believe, after all, we don't want that. We don't want politics to decide this is good, this is bad. Unfortunately, the first camp seems to have the upper hand at the moment. So you can see it in the car sector and light-duty vehicles, that there is a ban on the combustion engine. And I still say today a combustion engine is neither good nor bad. It just depends on what you burn in it. This makes a huge, huge difference. And I still think it is a mistake we are about to make when it comes to banning the combustion engine, because it means new dependencies on third countries. Right now we are running from one dependency, the dependency on energy from Russia, into the next dependency, the dependency on resources coming from China or coming from Africa, but it is Chinese companies which control the resources. Fortunately, motorcycles do not have a CO2 emission limit imposed. In fact, they're only represented in a tiny part of the CO2 emissions of the transport sector. We already heard it, it's less than 1%. And they are part of the solution, replacing cars, especially in urban mobility. The motorcycle industry is taking big efforts to decarbonize already. Electrification might be an option for some bikes, but there's also a lot of research on e-fuels. And I believe, especially when it comes to the weight of a vehicle, for a motorcycle, this is very, very important, even more important than for cars. So there is like the difference with sprung mass, unsprung mass, rotating mass, whatever. So there's so many things on a motorcycle which are quite specific for motorcycles, and they don't play such a big role, for example, for cars. ASEM has a very good concept. I already heard very often, and I don't really know if you mentioned it before, right vehicle, right place, right energy carrier. I believe this could be a blueprint in general for the transition we face in the transport sector. This sums it up very, very well. One could say, why do you go for such a meeting today? Maybe this could be counterproductive, because there is nothing in the pipeline coming from the Commission. And let's not wake up this sleeping dog in the Commission. Yeah? One could say that, but I believe it is very good that we have this meeting here, because first of all, I am convinced we have to make clear motorcycles is not part of the problem, but part of the solution, first point. And second point, I see a huge innovative potential of how we can handle this transition. So I want to close with the words which really come by my heart. Motorcycles is not part of the problem, it is part of the solution. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for the opening keynotes. As Antonio briefly mentioned, my name's Alad Walker, leading our automotive sector at Deloitte Consulting, and had the pleasure of working with ASEM and a number of its members over the last year around the transition to sustainable mobility. I'm really happy to zoom in for this panel discussion on the industry's vision for decarbonisation. I think we see 6, 7 different nationalities represented, and also a diversity in the panel in terms of background. We've got a mixture of business leaders, we've got a mixture of political, regulatory leaders, representatives from sector associations, and also those real technology leaders as well. And so during the course of the next hour or so, we'd like to try to get inputs from them on what role can power two-wheelers play in the transition to sustainable mobility? What is needed to decarbonize the industry, what is the role for some of the different technologies within that as well. We will also seek your input, so for those in the room after the first hour, invite you to raise your hands and ask your questions as well. And also for those listening online, it's simple in the tool. I've got the iPad just here. We'll be facilitating the questions as they come in and directing them towards the panelists. So with that in mind, I'd like to kick off, first of all, with Mrs. Isabel van Doorne, Deputy Head of Unit Innovation and Research at DG Move. So welcome. Maybe you could set the context in terms of the EU mobility strategy and how you see the role for power two-wheelers in the EU mobility strategy.
Thank you. I think that it was already said in the introductory speech. Well, the strategy that was issued some time ago now was a bit the implementation of the Green Deal that was published just before, and it was also followed by several packages. Basically, what we want to achieve, and maybe I would like to add something to what was said, is that the mobility strategy is not about vehicles, and it's about the system, so the whole system. What we bring is that we want that the system is more efficient, and of course you have mentioned it now, we are in the energy crisis, so we need to have also the efficiency in terms of energy consumption. But then we need also to have each mode, including the road transport, being, let's say, cleaner, more sustainable, and more energy efficient. So that's maybe the big picture of the strategy. Then beside that, we are using keywords, and maybe it could have been considered as, let's say, buzzwords, but we really think that we need to continue on that way, and that, which is multimodality. So maybe it's a variation of the right vehicle at the right place at the right, with the right energy. So it's used because I use my own energy. I am a pedestrian. So I think that we need also to take that into account, that we want to have a multimodal system and to use the right mode for the right purpose, even if when I walk. And maybe the last element I would like to bring is that we had a strategy which is, let's say, focusing on sustainable mobility, but we have also the smart mobility, because we always say that we need the smart element to have this system working and, let's say, future-proof. I would maybe stop here with my opening statement.
Perfect, thanks very much. Let's maybe go a little bit deeper into the PTW sector in particular in that context. Antonio, could you maybe explain a little bit more around the different types of power two-wheelers you have, the different types of use cases that we need to think about when it comes to decarbonisation?
Yeah, so indeed. Well, you can see here let's say the exhibition is showing different kinds of two-wheelers, and importantly, I believe we have a slide showing also the different kinds of categories that are involved in our type approval regulation. I don't know if they can be brought on the screen, but what characterizes the sector is clearly a huge difference depending on the kind of vehicle, the performance it has, and also the main usage it is meant to cover. So here on the screen you can see, obviously, from small displacement, urban vehicles that are meant to be indeed, as you were saying, light, agile, and fulfilling a very specific local need, so short range, all the way, I would say, to bigger vehicles, which are meant for a leisure purpose, in particular outside, of course, the urban environment, for whether it's leisure riding in terms of touring or I would say, sportier usage. And last but not least, and I'm thinking about this reflection you were mentioning about multimodality and what vehicle can provide the best service in a given circumstance. Clearly also vehicles that are aimed at basically ensuring small logistics and last mile delivery, where we do see, we believe, the institutions also see the same, and the cities, by the way, are also identifying this need to try and find perhaps more tailored solutions. So again, here's some examples on the slide of those vehicles. And one in the room here, which is showing what kind of potential is there. This is when it comes to the vehicles, and then of course about technology, without entering too much into the detail, because one of my colleagues will for sure be able to go into further detail. But depending on the characteristics of the vehicle, the usage it's meant to cover, and also the dynamics of the vehicle, Obviously, there will be some choices that will be more interesting than others when it comes to the propulsion technologies, and therefore the decarbonization process will be different. And this is what we are precisely aiming for, as was mentioned by Michele. Trying to secure this diversity is there, not just for the sake of it, if you like, but actually to solve dilemmas that are linked with the packaging of a vehicle and making sure it remains dynamic, affordable for the consumer, and therefore beneficial to society.
Thanks, Antonio. And maybe now a good time indeed to go a bit deeper onto the technology specifically with Mr. Helfried Söger, Managing Director and Chief Technology Officer for Powertrains at KTM. Could you maybe give your overview in terms of the different technologies available, how you see that supporting in terms of decarbonization?
For sure, yeah. I think the electrification will play a specific role in the future, but we are very technology open, as said in the entrance speak, because from my point of view, there are a couple of technical challenges to overcome, especially when we talk electric vehicles. And we've heard also the slogan, the right place, the right vehicle, and the right energy carrier. And in the past, we talked about gasoline only, and so the right energy carrier for electrification is now the battery, and with a lot of constraints. And we've heard a lot of improving power densities coming up and price decreases. This is not coming through up to now with the existing lithium-ion technologies. Maybe it's going to be a game changer with the solid oxide ones, but the entire industry is focused currently to the lithium-ion batteries. So when we start with the development of a new electric vehicle, we start, of course, with the energy carrier, and the battery is the heart of such a vehicle. And the weight is decisive, the dynamics is decisive, as we heard. So just to give an example, out of our layouts, you see the free rate E here with around 110 kilograms. If we compare that with an adventure bike from our house, which has around 238 kilograms with a specific range, the same vehicle would weigh around 420 kilograms, aiming for the same range. So it's all about battery, optimizing the power density and reduce the weight. So this is one technical issue for sure. And the other one is the safety, because with a very heavy vehicle, you cannot maintain the safety under dynamic behavior. And last but not least, it's the safety of the battery as such. So it's compared to the car open space, you need to take into account crash, thermal runaways, prevent fires and so on. So it's also a very cost-sensitive solution there. So we believe that the right place for a volume manufacturer for an electric vehicle is the urban mobility, and everything which is going into adventure, which is going into long range. It's not really sensible for our house, at least, to put the full bet on the electrification. We even more think that e-fuels, which we've proven here on the right-hand side, you see in 890 Duke, and we've done big investigations here utilizing synthetic fuels, and without any changes, it's validated to do so. So that's the route forward. And I've seen a couple of hybrids occurring at the market side. I think hybrids on the long run could also play a role here as a combination between a small electrification and a traditional ICE powered with synthetic fuels, for instance, but being then really locally CO2 neutral.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to invite to the floor as well now Eric Mark Hoytemer, Director General for Vehicles at Evera, the European Association for Electric Mobility. What's your view on electric mobility for PTWs?
Yeah, of course, coming from the electromobility field, and then before that I was working in the automotive industry, in the combustion engine industry at ASEA, and now I made a switch, and I think it's really important that we look at the future, we look towards a future which is zero emission. And then we of course can talk about carbon neutrality, but the vision that I have as a person that really likes motorcycles. As a young guy of 16 years old, I had a Yamaha, which I took apart and put back together again. And unfortunately, it was not going faster. It was only making more noise, which at that point in time I liked. But now we see the transition, and I have a Vespa now at home near Amsterdam, and I use this Vespa day to day in my daily commute. But when I now see the Vespa going electric, and I look at the alternatives, and I don't know how many people have driven an electric motorbike, but if you drive an electric motorbike, it is really great. It is really nice. It is silent, but it's so fast. It's so efficient. It is really nice to drive. So from the perspective of electromobility and our association, I think it's a great solution. From the perspective of zero emission, Fit for 55, the Green Deal, it's a great solution. I think motorbikes and motorcycles are perfectly fit to fit an electric engine. Also because of the low noise and of course the air quality directive that will come and will, just like in other sectors, will look at every emission, and noise and air quality are very important for the future of my children and my grandchildren, of your children and grandchildren. I think it's very important that electromobility not only is at the core of the thinking of the automotive industry, like we see now, but it's also at the core of the motorcycle industry. And last but not least, it is really fun to drive. Please try it. I think there are some excellent examples. It can go fast. If I look at the Ducati, it will be very fast. It can be very efficient if I look at the vehicles that are there for day-to-day deliveries, and it can be fun as well.
Thanks very much for the introduction. Also like to ask Mr. Ralf Diemer, Managing Director of the eFuel Alliance. What are we talking about when it comes to e-fuels, and how could it play a role in helping the decarbonisation for power two-wheelers?
Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for the invitation. I assume I should talk now about combustion engine motorbikes fueled by e-fuels, but I actually agree with Eric Mark that there are many use cases for electrification. That's, by the way, not only the case for motorcycles. But on the other hand, what I think is also key, and what we have to recognize, is we are coming maybe into a time where this one-fits-all solution, which we had in the past with the combustion engine, used for every use case, comes to an end. Possibly we will have several technologies in the transport sector as a whole for different use cases, simply because there are use cases where a battery is not possible. You mentioned one. You could talk about heavy goods, long-haul trucks, about planes and ships, for example. For that we need e-fuels. Now, the eFuel Alliance is a very young organization. We were founded in 2020. We have 185 members now. We are proud to say that one of our members is ACEM. One of the interesting contributions of the motorcycle sector would be actually, is it possible to decarbonize without being regulated? Because we have these heavy debates in the car sector about regulations. Maybe it's not necessarily the case that we need hard and heavy regulations. You see electric motorbikes without any regulation here, which I find very interesting. Now, e-fuels are synthetic fuels produced from mainly from renewable energy out of hydrogen. You need water and electricity. With electrolysers, you produce hydrogen. Out of this hydrogen, you need another CO2 source, and you could do gasoline, kerosene, diesel. You could do ammonium, methanol, and whatever else. So basically, you can produce everything synthetically based on renewable energies, what you do nowadays with oil-based fossil fuels. Our big problem is we talk a lot about e-fuels. Technology-wise, it's not rocket science, so the technology is there. We need to ramp up industrialized production. We are a little bit in the situation the car industry was 12 years ago. I was working for the car industry as well when it comes to electrification. I remember very well the debates amongst the manufacturers when Elon Musk came around the corner with the first electric cars. We had actually one German manufacturer who had on a very early stage electric cars, that was BMW. But in general, the mood was, there is no business case for that. Where should the battery cells come from? Do we have the raw materials, and so on and so forth? The regulator simply didn't care, made the CO2 regulation more stronger and stronger, and now we ended up with a regulation which is de facto banning the combustion engine. And the only way for manufacturers to fulfill this regulation is actually by electrification. Now, the mistake we make here, I think, is we talk very much about technology to run a car or a motorcycle or a truck. We should talk much more about the energy. Because an electric car is not climate neutral as long as it is run by coal energy, for example. And this is very often the case, for example, in Europe, especially in the country where I come from, in Germany. On the other hand, a combustion engine car could be climate neutral if we would have the e-fuels available. And now we are in this stage where we have to ramp up these fuels, where we have to ramp up hydrogen production in Europe, but also on a global scale. And this is possible when we would have the right regulatory framework in place, which we do not have right now. Discussions about Renewable Energy Directive, energy taxation, and so on and so forth are on the way. I assume we come into that a little bit later, a little bit more into detail.
Thanks very much. And then final speaker, last but not least, Dr. Bernhard Gintros, coordinator of the Swappable Batteries Motorcycle Consortium. Same question in a way to you. What is the Swappable Batteries Consortium trying to achieve, and how could it play a role in decarbonising for power two-wheelers?
Yeah, thank you for the question. In fact, the Swappable Battery Motorcycle Consortium has been launched recently in February of this year under the initiative from its core members, mainly Piaggio, KTM, Yamaha, and Honda, and with the aim to promote the electrification of the motorcycle sector as a solution towards massive decarbonization of the mobility sector, and specifically through using a swappable battery system as a solution accessible to all, as a solution to the concern of the consumers and users regarding range, charging time, infrastructures, but also costs. And today, the SBMC, this Swappable Battery Motorcycle Consortium, counts more than 30 members. 4 will join in the coming days, in fact, and there are more than 30 expressions of interest in the pipe that we expect to have on board very soon. So it has grown up extremely fast, showing the interest of many different let's say, stakeholders of the entire value chains. It's not only OEMs, it's also battery providers, also energy providers. And this is very important because it's a system approach. So this swappable battery system will not only bring some solution for the motorcycle itself, but for the entire, let's say, energy context, especially in urban areas. So today, the roadmap of SBMC is as follows. There will be some development of common specificities, technical specificities, or specifications, common also design specifications, common to all members, in a way that these people will then consider these specifications in their development for trying to unify, to harmonize the solutions and make things relevant for anyone having, let's say, a kind of interoperability, compatibility also for different brands, different models throughout the world, and especially also in Europe, because now we have a real key strategic targets with this decarbonization and towards carbon neutrality. And from this development, there is also a need to confirm some new innovations and then to promote this innovation as mainly through standardization as a very, let's say, a robust booster from innovation to market, supporting and helping dissemination deployment of successful new solutions. And so that's really the aim of this SBMC, keeping in mind that the ramping up and growing up in terms of membership has been quite impressive this year, extended a lot what we expected initially.
Thanks very much. So we've heard the first opening remarks from each of the different panelists. We'd like to move now into a further discussion, and maybe Antonio, you can kick us off. Obviously, we're sat here in December 2022, but it's one moment in time, but decarbonisation is a journey. Can you maybe talk about some of the progress that you feel the sector has been making, and then also, you know, what for you are the main challenges ahead, and what are the main asks that you have as ASEM for the journeys ahead?
Yeah. So thanks. I'd like to start maybe picking up on what Eric Mark was mentioning. Indeed, on electrification, we do see the growth of what was a pure niche a few years back. Obviously, that niche is still a minority of the market, but we do see this picking up in particular for the low displacement vehicles and in the urban environment. So you were mentioning scooters in some markets, and it's also linked with taxation, as was mentioned by Michele, incentives in general on how mobility is directed. We do see that picking up in some markets significantly. In some markets we have, for mopeds, we're close to 30% of new sales being electric, which is probably much higher than anything you can have so far on cars. But this is linked to the specificity of the product. And I think this is the really important thing. When people purchase a vehicle for urban mobility, they will be facing with an additional cost, an additional complexity, but that is linked also with the short range use. So it's an acceptable cost in some markets with some incentives. In other markets where the incentives are missing, it becomes a huge markup cost. Yeah. So I think this is one of the areas where we do see progress, but obviously it depends very much on the national situation. If you look at bigger motorbikes, so here we have some examples also of prototypes which are linked with competition here in the middle. So obviously it shows the industry is looking very much also at solutions there when it comes to the electromobility, but we mentioned already the challenges that are there once you extend the range or the performance, and what it means in terms of the impact it has on the dynamics of the vehicle. So here, for this part of the market, the niche is still a very small one. And we do see that this is going to take a long time to address this, to improve when it comes to electromobility. And this is why we push very much for the multi-pathway to decarbonization as a way forward, realizing what was mentioned by Ralph also, that e-fuels and in general also in the intervention made by Helfried, we do see these vehicles taking a much longer time to be able to move to mass production, if you like, of electric solutions. And that is why we are aiming really for these ones on e-fuels and I would say in general the internal combustion engine. Let me allow me one step back. I mean, you said also where do we come from? I mean, we have a history, if you go back in time, of being really providers of mobility. I think everybody will remember that in the 40s, 50s, two-wheelers, before you started using your Vespa, probably, yes, the vehicles were a clear mobility answer, and we see that this is coming back because there's more and more.
I'd like to dive a bit deeper into some of the business challenges and also technology challenges, perhaps with the colleagues here from Piaggio and KTM. Michele, you've got a range at Piaggio of electric and hybrid models. What were some of the challenges that you face when entering this space as a business leader?
Well, you know, I think we didn't have any challenge because the electro technology is nothing new. You have to rebuild the whole vehicle just to use a battery. And the battery cost is the problem. And the autonomy of the vehicle is the problem. So the R&D department hasn't done a great job in my company. They just copied a dishwasher machine and re-engineered the vehicle. But once again, the customer told us, which is autonomy. And I said, okay, this is the Vespa, so why do you care about autonomy? You care about design, history, joy, riding with your girlfriend or boyfriend and have a nice kiss at the bar. I said, 20 kilometers. He says, okay, I don't want. I go by feet. It's healthier. It's more intelligent. And I said, I agree with you. And that's why I think, even if the sector doesn't need any legislation, because I repeat, we counter for 0.8 of the problem. So there's much more, that is 99%, that is a bigger problem than scooters or bikes. I think if in the future we will be obliged somehow to go into just one technology, you choose, I don't care, electric, hydrogen, but just one. First of all, we kill the fantasy of entrepreneurs. They like to fight each other and conquer the market with design, intelligent vehicles, software, whatever it is. You don't need young generation working with you because you don't have to invent nothing. You just buy batteries and you put on a vehicle. So why do you need people to, think 24 hours a day about new products? Everything will be the same. Nobody will enjoy nothing. And perhaps the sector will die. So I'm not worried about technology. Technology is our main job every day, and we enjoy working on new technologies every day. As Piaggio Group, we founded in 2015 a company in Boston working with MIT and Harvard and architects and philosophists and anthropologists to fulfill the needs of the future of mobility. We created a robot that follow you in an intelligent way, that carry things. So it's not a problem, the technology. It's our job. It's our life. But if you tell me this is the technology you have to use, it's a boring company. And the world will be worse than today. Yeah, we will have perhaps low polluting, because remember that electric vehicles are not zero polluting. Yeah, not polluting here, but it's perhaps polluting in India, killing people using carbon, producing batteries and electricity. So the cycle is not zero polluting. I don't know about e-fuels. We are studying, but I don't think they will be zero polluting. Hydrogen will not be zero polluting, so somehow the pollution problem will remain on the planet, reducing it. And that's good. And I think we have to. We are entrepreneurs. We have to work for a better world, as we do, and somehow, sustain the company making money. But I repeat, don't kill the fantasy of people with just one decision on one technology. Because this is the worst idea one person can have in his mind or her mind. So neutral technology is the real competition where we have to fight every day, quoting it, to enjoy. And if we need to reduce carbon prints, I agree, we will do. We can do, no problem. And I agree with Mrs. Van Doorn, it's a system, it's not just a vehicle. I see many diesel buses for, public transportation. Why do majors don't substitute their, public transportation immediately? It's the taxpayers giving them the money to sustain mobility, public transportation. So please do it. So the world is not just one or the other. So let us work on whatever we think is good with a good target to reduce the carbon print in the world. I repeat, it's not a 0.5 problem or 0.8. It depends on the year, But without any legislation, you can see many, many ideas around the corner here. So I'm not worried about technology. I'm worried about someone that tells me what I have to do. It's like when I say my children, you have to do this, they do exactly the opposite. And I like them doing the opposite because they have to grow with their mind free from someone deciding for her or for him. And that's what I do with my children. So please, let us do the same as entrepreneurs.
Very good. Compelling vision. I'm sure you'll all agree.
This is not, this is not perhaps R&D vision, but this is my vision.
Yeah. Maybe to complement that, and then we'd love to get some responses from some of the other panelists. On the KTM side, you were one of the first historic European OEMs to also launch electric with maybe a different product range, different types of use cases as well. Can you maybe talk around your technology kind of vision and some of the challenges that you see as well?
I'd like to catch up with Michele. I like this very much, this statement, because I think one word to that, the politics need to create a framework, and a regulation can be a good thing if it's done in the right way. Mr. Glück, you are on the right camp, I believe so. But the technologies must be executed by engineers and scientists, and I think we will find the right technology pathways to fulfill the decarbonization in the future. I'm absolutely convinced about that. Coming back to your question, we're very proud of having introduced the KTM Freeride in 2014 as the first high voltage off-road vehicle. We are maintaining that, so we have had at that time certain issues to bring it really and launch it to the markets for the reasons that people do not accept it 100%, but it has changed a lot. And right now we're working on 3 platforms for new electric vehicles in this low voltage range up to 48 volt, because we strongly believe this is a good combination of weight, as claimed before, and also cost, because every manufacturer needs also to have a close look to the ecological and not only the economical way. So we are developing these platforms, and the technology is a cool one if you ride it off-road, but also on the street. And yeah, as I said before, we see e-fuels as real alternative in addition, and we will give that a try also on the MotoGP with synthetic fuel. So by 2024 we will fire the MotoGP engines with a blend of regular gasoline and synthetic fuels. And by 2027 it's plans to have entire synthetic fuels here on board. And also utilizing the benefits of these synthetic fuels in terms of improved efficiency and even further reduced particulate emissions, for instance, or hydrocarbons and so on.
Very good. Maybe on to Mr. Gluck. You've heard there some of the different industry perspectives. You mentioned it a little bit in your introduction, but having heard a bit more the stories, let's say, what are your thoughts on the industry's decarbonisation vision? Do you think that the EU really does need to or will choose a technology, and yeah, how do you see that?
So in the beginning, I would like to prevent a misunderstanding. First of all, I believe that battery electric mobility can be a huge advantage in certain fields. There is advantages and disadvantages. One advantage is, for example, take my house, I have a solar system on the roof. So it is very good if I can just charge my motorcycle coming from my solar power from my roof. It's cheaper. Huh? So also the fun of a battery electric bike is huge fun, because you have power, you have high elasticity, you can just pull the throttle and you can just go straight forward. So this is one of the huge advantages, but it has disadvantages at the same time. So for example, the weight, we were talking about that, we were talking about resources. And so I just believe it is wrong to say one is good, the other one is bad. So what we need is, we need some competition in between the different technologies, because it makes every single, this is what you were telling about. By the way, my children would love you, and they would love this approach. But this was actually, Michele, what you said before. We need to have fantasy, and we need to have some good competitions in between the technologies. And what we have to ensure as politics is, we don't know what the best technology is. Hey, listen, I'm a surgeon, I'm a medical doctor. I don't pretty much know nothing about e-fuels or battery electric vehicles or whatever. I'm not a specialist in this. I'm a politician. And I believe it is our responsibility in politics to go for a framework which is fair. We need a level playing field. And I just believe that if we just compare battery electric mobility with internal combustion engines, it's a little bit like comparing apples and pears. Because on one hand, it was mentioned before, a battery electric vehicle, it can be that it's not CO2 neutral on one hand, because you burn coal for electricity at the moment, like really a lot in Germany. And on the other hand, with the synfuel, you actually can go for the 100% CO2 reduction if you make sure that you only use green electricity for the production of the hydrogen and for the synfuel. So we need to seek for a level playing field there. And what's so important is, and this is what I don't like in this regulation we have for cars, we only have this tailpipe approach. You know, we just measure at the tailpipe and we're so happy that a battery electric car doesn't have a tailpipe. And we ignore the fact that the emission takes place somewhere else. And on the other hand, we measure CO2 coming from synfuels, and at the same time we ignore that it's exactly this CO2 which is coming out of the tailpipe was already put in the synfuel in first place. So in total, we are really neutral. And so after all, I believe we should go for this whole variety of different technologies. And as I said before, let's not talk about the motorcycle sector. We're talking about less than 1% CO2 emission. You know, like take the low-hanging fruit, which is somewhere else. First point. Second point, I believe it's your sector which already proved that you are highly innovative without regulation. Without a regulation? Maybe not. We have ETS. Let's not forget about this. This will hopefully also be valid for motorcycles. And third of all, as I said before, we have to work on a framework and not, as politicians, we have to work on a framework and not on specific technologies. This is, after all, your job.
Very good. Any immediate reactions from the other panelists? Well, maybe I hand over to Isabel. So we heard there a couple of themes around, I mean, thinking about the PTW sector in the context, in the broader context, and also around having competition between different technologies as well. Isabel, your department works on research, on innovation, in the broader context of the future of mobility. What do you think is needed in terms of further investment, further development of those innovations, those different technologies?
So basically what we have done, I have to admit that I have no answer. Maybe I should say it first. So what we have done, what we are currently doing, is that first, we do not treat transport in isolation, because for RNI, we are organized is what we call a cluster, where we have put together climate, energy, and transport. So already, again, I was talking about the system approach within the transport, but then we have an integrated approach for RNI development. Then what we have also done is that we have, for transport, we have given a lot of money, EU money, in partnership and joint undertakings to address the different programs. So we are trying to support the technological innovation, or not only technological innovation, because we believe in all innovation, also in social innovation. So we are funding, for example, the partnership 2on20, where we want to have, let's say, clean vehicles. We are funding clean aviation. We are funding the clean hydrogen joint undertaking. So what we want to achieve, of course, our motto, our goal is the Green Deal. The Bible is a Green Deal. So now we have put the investment we have, and we do not have a lot. We all know it. We have very little from EU funds. So we want to plant the seeds in all these partnerships, because we believe that it is a question of partnerships. And I think that your initiative is also a way to show that we should do it together. So in several fora, I hear the word co-petition, where you have to cooperate when it is needed, and you compete where you can compete. And that's, I think, where we want to invest. So no clear, let's say, I would not say that we are imposing, because we are drafting the work program. We are drafting it ourselves for some part, and we ask the partnerships and the joint undertaking to draft it. So we let the experts say what we have to do to achieve. So maybe we are contributing to this framework that we are talking about today.
Eric Mark?
Yeah, first reaction to what was said earlier, and I like what is happened, what DG Move is saying, and looking at the European perspective. I think we should be careful making the same mistake that the automotive industry was making about 10 years ago, and only talking about exemption and why it's not possible. Tesla proved without regulation it was possible to make an electric car, and now the majority of cars electric cars were coming from the US instead of Europe. Let's not make the same mistake here in Europe again. Let's make sure that European bikes and the European motorcycle industry in Europe is thriving and can go forward. And it is 80% of the bikes and already 30% of the mopeds that are electric. And let's make sure that we take the opportunity and make sure that we have a thriving European motorcycle industry, allowing for those nice electric motorbikes. And it is better for the environment, and there will of course be cities banning combustion engines, also for motorbikes. And we saw that happening already in China, where now the majority or all motorbikes or motorcycles are already electric. And I think we will see the similar things happening in Europe, because people need clean cities, people need clean air to breathe. And that's why I think if we self-regulate a little bit, if we make it happen ourselves in the motorcycle industry, I think we have a big opportunity to not be pushed into a certain direction and to stay technology neutral, but to already give the solutions to the people who want to use them. And there are many already using them without regulation. And we saw the same again in the automotive industry. People like to use those new alternatives, which are more modern, more flexible, lower in maintenance, better to drive, lower in noise, easier to drive, and of course have no emissions. And emissions that were discussed from battery production, one thing is clear, that if you burn something in an engine, it will disappear forever. If you have a battery, you can regenerate the battery, repurpose the battery. So batteries, we have them in our mobile phones. You see the technology change and evolvement. Batteries will stay and will improve. And if we have a sodium battery, lithium battery soon, then also the weight issue is probably gone. And then every motorcycle can be more efficient based on driving on electricity.
Maybe a first comment from Ralph and then over to Andreas.
So if this is true and the electric technology is the perpetuum mobile of the future mobility, then I wonder why we need regulation where we ban other technologies. Because if this is the case, what you say, then the market will decide anyway. I have my doubts there, but that's another story. What we do not have, and I fear in terms of hydrogen and synthetic fuels, we do make the same mistake. But this time not by an industry, but by the regulator. Because first of all, we do not have a level playing field in place. Simply because nobody regulates the value chains, but only the tailpipe. And of course, on the tailpipe, I had these discussions with Franz Timmermans, and he always said, well, guys, with your e-fuels, show me how you create a zero-emission car. And then I said, well, I made the calculation with CO2, but then he said, but you have the other emissions, which is true, but that was not the question to be answered by a CO2 regulation, which we discussed in that matter. So clearly, a combustion engine car can be, or motorbike can be run CO2 neutral if you have the right fuels in place. Now, on the other hand, as I said in the beginning, our problem now is that we have a discussion right now when it comes to the Renewable Energy Directive and the so-called delegated acts, which are in discussion right now, that the European Commission tends actually to regulate every step on the way. So you have to be regulated which kind of energy you are allowed to use when you are producing hydrogen or e-fuels. You have to be regulated which CO2 source you are allowed to use if you want to make e-fuels and you need a CO2 source, and in which time you are allowed to use this CO2 source. and so on and so forth. I could do now many more examples. The problem here is, if we go this path further down the road, there will be not many investments in e-fuel and hydrogen production in Europe, but in other parts of the world. Because what we see right now, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, with a completely different approach. They just tell you, produce green hydrogen in the United States of America. You can even take your German electrolyzers if you want, so no protectionism here. And then you get $3 per kilo green hydrogen tax incentive guaranteed for 10 years. That's a huge game changer. So talk to electrolyzer producers right now. They will tell you everything what they can produce will go to the United States anytime soon. The good thing about this story is we will see a mass production of e-fuels soon, starting, I would presume, in 3 years, but not in Europe. And one last point I would like to add, because there is a lot of talk about the system, the Commission talks about the mobility system, and this is all right. I agree with all of that, but we have to talk about the energy system as well. As soon as we have vehicles in the market which are not depending on our current energy system, which we want to get rid of it because it mainly depends on fossil fuels, we have to think about different energy systems here. Now, in Brussels are many people around who tell us this can all be electrified. And we don't talk only about transport here, by the way. We talk about industry. Everything can be electrified. I doubt that for 2 reasons. First of all, technology-wise, it's not possible to electrify everything. I could tell you a nice story about a call I had by a battery manufacturer the other day who asked me, where can I get e-fuels? And I asked him, why do you need e-fuels? He said, I have some ovens in my production line which I cannot run electrified because the temperatures are too high. So even there, e-fuels are needed. So if this is the case, then and the second reason why I don't believe this will work, we never will produce enough renewable energy in Europe for that. We are a continent who is importing energy, and anybody who believes that we will energy autark in a future based on renewable energy has no idea what he's doing to the wealth and the economy of this continent. If it's true that we will be energy importing also in the future, but on a non-CO2 based basis, so to speak, we need liquid and gaseous molecules because we cannot import electricity directly from South America, from North America, or from wherever they are produced. Very last point, sorry I'm too long, I know, but energy security. Now we see after the terrible war happening in Ukraine and the energy crisis we are in, that it's a bad idea to be dependent on only one major energy supplier, for example, for gas. I mean, I come from Germany, I can tell you the debates are really interesting we have right now. The big chance we have with e-fuels is actually to distribute our energy consumption and also energy supply in the future, because countries like Chile, like Australia, like Namibia, like North America again, by the way, other places in Africa can come into place, produce e-fuels, and we can also, with partnerships, choose different energy distributors in the future. I think when we discuss this whole issue, we have to have a view on the systematics of the energy system as well, and only then we will come also, by the way, to reach the climate goals, which we are far away from right now. So.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to respond quickly to what Eric Mark said. Sorry, turned it around. Eric Mark said. You know, I agree on a lot of things you said. So, for example, that this sector already does a lot, even though there's no regulation. But you know, when I heard you before and I was listening very closely, for me it sounded a little bit that electrification per se is a value in itself, which is not. I believe we have to seek for the best technologies. And of course, electrification is one cornerstone, not only a stone, maybe even a big, huge cornerstone No doubt about that. I don't want to doubt that. But please let's keep the discussion open also for those other technologies. And then very, very often, I believe I heard the word efficiency before. I believe Isabel was talking about efficiency. I completely agree. Efficiency is like one of the major things we should seek for. But there is also other principles. It is not only the principle of energy efficiency, which is important. So for example, in Germany right now, we have this year, in 2022, we have a share of almost 50% of renewables in the electric grid. And the more renewables you have in the electric grid, the more renewable capacity you have, the more you face two problems. One problem is you don't have enough electrical power because it's dark and there is no wind. But the other problem is, if you really want to seek for higher share of renewables, then the installed capacity has to be so much higher than the highest demand, because you want to make sure that you always get electric power. But this means, on the other hand, that every year we have more and more days where we have too much electrical power in the grid. This is, by the way, the times when we turn our wind turbines out of the wind, because please, not more electric power right now. We have negative prices on the electric stock for electricity in Leipzig, and this is when we sell our electrical the electric power from Germany to Austria, for example, because you guys have the possibility to store it, we don't. And if you take a look at Europe, we have a storage problem. So please, under those circumstances, that sometimes we have too much electrical power in the grid, please let's not only seek for efficiency, let's also seek for security of supply. And because of that, we need those other technologies. And as I said, electricity, battery electric mobility is important, and it's a cornerstone, but it can't be the only solution to this problem.
Antonio, you wanted to add something as well?
Yeah, it was on another topic, but that's okay, because I think I can reconnect to this one. I think, Eric Mark, you were mentioning the importance of research. You were also highlighting, Isabel, this issue. Partnerships were mentioned, and obviously we're part of PPPs when it comes to 2.0, Green Vehicle Initiative before. And we seek to really put on the map what the L category can bring in terms of contribution. And we try to identify what are the needs when it comes to improvements in the technology that would make it cheaper, more affordable, therefore more within the reach of the market. So this is something that we do, for instance, on electromobility with some of the foreseen calls within 2.0. And we're making sure that we can, with that, not only improve what the contribution would be on the passenger mobility side, but also on the small logistics, which we think is an untapped potential, largely when it comes to our vehicles and smaller ones. So that's one area. I was hoping that maybe Helfried could give us a bit more details about your project with the Duke and what you're doing also on the e-fuel side. The reason being that by doing this, we are actually showing that we're not leaving any of these paths unexplored. We are working on this. And the partnership aspect is quite important when it comes to the urban mobility part, because whilst we have part of the answer, we really rely on establishing good cooperations with the cities, making sure that they have two-wheelers in mind, also when they design their own mobility systems, which is, I would say, unfortunately not always the case. So there's always this picture of private transportation, cars is something they're trying to limit in a way, encouraging public transport, as we said, micro-mobility and cycling. But here vehicles in the room show there's a lot of potential today, even with, I would say, today's technology. And if you project that forward, whether it's e-fuels or whether it's electric, there's a lot of potential for making good use of space that is very limited in the city and providing a service. So this is a general point. Maybe, Helfried, you could give us a bit more details about the...
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
I mean, one additional point to what was said. I think what we need to go back is to Fit for 55 at the end of the day, because we want to decarbonize. Otherwise, we would get lost. So from my perspective, we need to take into account the fleet. We have a big fleet in place, and we're discussing only new technology. We need to provide technologies for the fleet, and this is primarily true for the passenger car area because we have millions of cars out there, but we have also seen right before we have a lot of powered two-wheelers out there. So why not combine the best of the two worlds to be real sustainable? Do the electrification on one hand side, do the e-fuels on one hand side. So we have always these discussions, what is best? Both is best, and we need to utilize both, because if it's according to the European Union right now, and everything must be electric, we will not achieve the CO2 target in 2035 nor in 2050. No way, from my perspective. So this means we need maybe, and the European Union missed the chance a couple of years ago on the passenger car side with the introduction of the Euro 5 legislation with this tank-to-wheel emissions. I think we need to come along on the politician side with a life cycle assessment of the entire CO2 path, and then the vehicle is playing a certain role on it, yes, of course, but it's still true for the battery electric cars in the entire ecosystem. So I think we are prepared as manufacturers to compete with this CO2 cradle-to-grave approach, and then the best technology will survive. So I think this is the reason why we strongly believe in this technology openness, and not only what you have pointed out, of course, we rely on our combustion-powered engines because they are high-performance bikes, and they cannot be substituted on a large scale with pure battery electric vehicles because the infrastructure is not there. It's a pleasure application what we are selling, not only us, all the examples you see here. And you want to go to the mountain, you want to go off-road and so on. And I'm wondering who is providing the infrastructure for a pure electric vehicle in the forest. Maybe a diesel generator then providing the energy, I don't know. But therefore we have established a very intensive program of analyzing synthetic fuels on the fleet engines, and the result is overwhelming. You pour it in and you get better results. Of course, the research octane is a little lower, yes, but this can be overcome. But the emissions are slightly better, and without any substitution, you can refill the fleet. And what Ralf has pointed out, with the current legislation, where only battery electric vehicles and H2 is seen as CO2 neutral, nobody will really invest into big plants and provide the synthetic fuels. So from my point of view, there is a need to rethink this legislation, because as an engineer, what I in addition do not understand, if H2 is seen as CO2 neutral, why is a derivative out of H2 not CO2 neutral? This is no logic at all. So please give us a helping hand in the upcoming recital in 2026 to be more logic-minded in the legislation.
Eric, Mark?
Yeah, maybe to comment or answer some of the statements that were done. And of course, when we look at e-fuels, for example, I really agree that if we look at the existing fleet of motorcycles and cars, let's bring them all to e-fuels. But the disadvantage of e-fuels, of course, is that you still have the emission. You made a point here next to me that if you use hydrogen to create a e-fuel, hydrogen, and using hydrogen in a fuel cell, as a chemical engineer I know, then you create oxygen and water. You can create water from oxygen and hydrogen. But when you put an e-fuel in the same combustion engine, then you still create CO2, you still create nitrogen, and nitrogen is even worse than CO2. Then the other topic that you made on the energy mix, I think you are right. We need, of course, to solve the energy mix issue. And if Germany keeps burning coal to produce electricity, that is a huge problem we need to solve immediately. I think some might say use nuclear, like in France, maybe not the right solution as well. But let's look for solar. We can import solar energy from north of Africa. We can import water energy, hydro energy from Norway. We can import lots of wind energy. The Netherlands is producing lots of wind energy. Germany is producing wind energy. The UK is producing wind energy. So I think we can generate a lot of carbon neutral sources to drive our motorcycles on or our cars on. I think the key thing is, let's keep the technology and let's innovate the technology to make the cities and clean and keep them clean. And don't have this brownish glow in the city in the center of summer, which is nitrogen, not even CO2, nitrogen still coming from e-fuels, still coming from combustion engines. Let's get rid of that, and it is easily possible. And last I wanted to say, if you want to drive a motorcycle in the forest, I think first driving a motorcycle in a forest, disturbing the animals, disturbing the night nature, probably not the best thing to do. But if you want to drive your motorcycle in the forest, I think you better have an electric motorcycle, which is quiet and no emission, than having a combustion engine motorcycle. I just want to make the point. That's what I wanted to say.
We have one.
And you have one, yes, I know.
I heard some, or saw, let's say, some contradictions to what you were saying, Eric, Mark, maybe over towards the end, first of all?
Yeah, yes, maybe just to react on this. I heard a few, let's say, keywords there that were initially cost, range, weight, resources, storage, also environmental impact, etc. And this is really multi-sectorial approach we need to have for the different solutions we would like to provide. And to me, that's also where the legislation, and I'm back to it, is our legislation brings coherence in what we try to develop. Having said that, that's exactly the driver we are also using in this swappable battery motorcycle, let's say, consortium, where we try with these type of approaches to solve some issues regarding the range, as President Colanino said before, because we have this capacity to provide to swap empty batteries to full charge batteries within 1 minute, so which is something very short. But we can also bring or solve these issues about weight, because instead of having additional batteries, we have a smaller number, so weight will be lower. About resources, and that's something very important. Resource efficiency is also one of the key issues that drives many of the European, especially European regulations and pieces of regulations. Again, if you have the capacity to gather all the batteries on a charging station, that's where you can have some systematic check about the state of health of the batteries. That's where you can identify and anticipate where the batteries will be close to, let's say, this end of life for mobility applications, and could have to be reused for other applications. Could be stationary, could be on emergency activities and things like that. But also where you can decide when it's time to go to the end of life, to dismantle and recycle batteries, having all batteries at the same time. And this is a very important issue also for the urban developments, where cities have some responsibility in that sense. And we can provide that. The next point is about what I heard about this stability of the energy systems with the S, okay? Again, storage. We have seen with electrification of our society, storage is key. Again, if you have quite an intense, significant storage capacities in a charging station, you can start to include this in the microgrid or local grid management. And this is something very important. Last point, as an illustration about the support of legislation towards innovation as well, is because we had an example with the alternative fuel infrastructure regulation. Sen and Select received some standardization requests from the European Commission. And specifically, I can read to you, in one of these standardization requests, the Commission asked for a unified solution for battery swapping for L categories vehicles. So this is a booster. It means everybody will have to work together, and that's what we propose, towards fulfilling this type of request. So there is really a systemic approach, and we all need to have this. There is not just one single solution or silos approach. It's something that needs to be tackled on a holistic manner, or horizontal manner. And then, if we are doing so, we can probably solve or bring solutions to many of the key issues and challenges we identified here.
Thanks very much, Bernard. Ralph, I saw you as well shaking your head a little bit as some of the...
Yeah, I was astonished about the remark that we have to quickly change the energy system. Germany is a very good example how quickly things can go wrong, if I may say so. The whole so-called energy Wende in Germany was based on gas, actually. Because we have one problem, we have the storage problem, which Andreas Glück mentioned, but we also have times in the year, like the last days, for example, where we have no wind. And then we have no energy production at all. But unfortunately, that happens very often in times where we need a lot of energy because it's, for example, winter. So storage is one solution to that, but in addition, if you are an industry country and if you look into the needs of the industry of energy amounts in Germany, you need a backup solution, and that was gas. The philosophy was, we have gas as long as we need, and we will replace gas by hydrogen. Hydrogen-ready gas supply, so to speak. You have to produce the hydrogen somehow, even for that. And here again, I'm at the point, if we would regulate electric cars like we regulate e-fuels right now, then the regulation would look like electric cars are only allowed if they run by renewable energy. That is what we do right now with the Renewable Energy Directive and the delegated acts related to it. Now, I want a production of e-fuels and hydrogen out of renewable energy, of course. The French will have their nuclear part of that, fine with me. Personally, I'm not a fan of nuclear, but if there are other solutions, at least when it comes to CO2, that might be a right solution, but okay. But we need now the kickoff for this production, and we do not have this kickoff right now, because right now the regulatory framework is actually hindering investments here. So I just want to point out that this is really the key discussion we are having right now in Europe and also on national level, because that's, at least in Germany, also a problem when it comes to the national regulation here. If we don't change our course here significantly, we will lack of energy at the end of the day, lack of renewable energy in large amounts in the future. And again, we won't fulfill our climate goals then.
Sticking on the topic of e-fuels specifically, there's a question here to Mr. Gluck coming from Corinne Monk from the Austrian Association of the Motorcycle Industry. What chance do you give e-fuels, both for PTWs and also for cars, if the EU does an evaluation after 5 years? What chance do you give e-fuels in that context?
This is a very, very interesting question. I believe we have to see different, like between the motorcycle sector and cars. Right now, the way on cars and light-duty vehicles is like straightforward to battery electric only. Of course, there could be hydrogen could play a role. And now this is the really interesting question, what about the evaluation? I'm afraid that in 26 we will have realized that this resource dependency on China is not a good thing to do. And then we wake up in 26 and we say, we should go for the internal combustion engine with e-fuels. We should add that. This is one scenario which is, I believe, possible. But the problem is that then we have a loss of 5 years of innovation for the internal combustion engine for cars, because the innovation de facto already stopped today. And so I believe this is like the combination of two bad things. Like that at the end of the day, we say, okay, let's go for internal combustion engines again, but we can buy them like either in China or Korea or wherever in the world. So this is like one major risks I see. And second point, why I believe that there is a possibility, and maybe even the Commission believes that there is some scenario where we have to go back to internal combustion engines, maybe, is Euro 7. I ask myself, why do we go for a Euro 7 regulation when we already defined that we will not have any further new internal combustion engines from 35 on? So maybe the Commission doesn't even believe its own positive attempt on banning the combustion engine by 35. Maybe there is this scenario that we will have to come back. But the question is how much damage will be done until we find out. So this is, I believe pretty much everything is open. And so don't put all eggs in one basket. Let's not accept that we will have a dependency on raw materials and raw earth for a whole sector. And because of that, as I said, I believe your sector of the motorcycle sector is a lot better off than the car sector at the moment.
Maybe one additional comment to that. One or the other knows maybe that in China, where I was very active in former times, they have introduced this new energy vehicle legislation with a strict road against pure electric driving. This was a couple of years ago. And then they realized maybe there is something else, and they opened it up again for the internal combustion engine with higher efficiencies up to 45%. And of course, China is China, so they change from one day to the other, and there's no complaint at all coming from the industry and even the people. But it's a clear direction, and suddenly they are ahead in the internal combustion engine technology compared to the high nation of combustion engines, which is Europe and Germany. So we lose track, from my point of view here, on the high-end technology of the internal combustion engine, and we are anyhow too late on the electrification nor on the battery production here in Europe, because we don't have the amount of raw earth materials to do this in a good way. So it's a lose-lose situation. And grabbing up your statement, maybe we should not wait until 2026. We should push ahead for having a quicker decision.
Thank you very much. And then an open question to the group from Simon Noon, the head of Europe at ZAP EV. How do we decarbonize the existing fleet out there, and who is responsible for this?
It's the legislator. First of all, of course, we have to say it's the legislator. So I believe that one tool, as I mentioned already before several times, is ETS. We have like less certificates coming every year, and till 2050 there is no certificates at all, because then we want to have a net zero emission. So I believe this is a quantity controlled based system. And how can we solve this? I believe we can solve it. E-fuels will play a major role. No matter whether we talk about new cars coming from 35 or not, and new vehicles coming from 35 or not, I believe that e-fuels will play a major role, no matter what, also regarding the existing fleet. So this will be completely clear. And so even though if some say we don't want internal combustion engines like from 35 on, we have to make our way. We have to start now, because we need e-fuels also for the existing fleet, and we should better run.
Yeah, maybe also to answer the same question, if you look at decarbonizing the current fleet in Europe, we should take the example of what's happening in Norway, for example, where with subsidies and positive things, people are not buying the combustion engine cars anymore, or motorcycles. And they have moved 80% of the purchase currently in Norway is electric. More than 50% of the fleet is now electric. So that's, I think, the way forward. That's the way it started in Norway, the way it started in the Netherlands, which is now leading in Europe on this topic. If you now look at France and Germany, who are investing heavily in charging infrastructure and with subsidies, and also in Spain, last week I was in Spain, you get lots of subsidies for electrification there. And there you see people easily making the shift because the maintenance of the car is lower. You don't have to pay the high price of the gasoline, and the car is driving itself much easier if it's electric. So you see that people are already changing their mind if the total cost of ownership is lower. I think the same will happen in the motorcycle industry, that there will be use cases, and of course there will also be use cases which are unique, just like in a car industry where you need an e-fuel or where you need hydrogen, but the majority of use cases will be much more efficient, much more lower total cost of ownership for the consumer to go for electrification.
Always I hear this Norway example. I mean, if you have enough gas to sell to be that rich, then of course you can afford high subsidies for everything. I'm not sure that Romanians or Bulgarians are able to do that. I'm actually quite sure that not even Germany is able to do subsidies in that amount we saw in Norway. But anyway, again, if there is a political majority for subsidies for a technology, fine with me. I'm not so sure, just one personal remark, why I should pay as a taxpayer a strategy, a declared strategy of an automobile manufacturer. Because I'm told always, if you ever set in an electric car, then you don't want anything else, so why do I have to subsidize that? I'm not so sure if this is, but anyway. To your question, or to the question, how do we decarbonize the existing fleet? There are two options. Get rid of it, very easy. Very expensive. I'm not sure if a majority of the people would agree with that. Or find other ways to fuel them. That could be partly biofuels, of course, and at the end of the day, e-fuels. But again, I'm not sure if you expect, as regulator, that, for example, mineral oil companies invest into e-fuels to fuel these existing fleets. And by the way, we are not talking about an existing fleet in Europe. We have around 1.4 billion vehicles on the road worldwide, and we have many areas in the world where most likely electrification will take a little longer, and maybe subsidies are not around at all. But clearly, then you have to build a business case. Banning the technology on one hand and then expect that people invest into decarbonizing the existing fleet will not work. There has to be another business case. That's all I'm saying, and then we are again with the regulator. So Andreas Lück said the regulator is also responsible to kick off that. We don't necessarily need much subsidies for building up a production if we would have ambitious quotas and sub-quotas in the Renewable Energy Directive. For example, that would be a kickstart as its own in the first place without any subsidies. And if we would then, for example, talk about energy taxation and lowering the energy taxation for climate neutral fuels, as we do also for climate neutral electricity, of course, then we are not so far away from a business case if we have mass production, because we will come down to €2, €1.50, €1.20 per liter production cost for gasoline or diesel, e-diesel in the future. And when I say the future, I mean we talk about 2026, 2030, depends of course when the kickstart actually starts.
So I'm quite used to go to different forums. I go to the one on cyclists, I am going to the one on public transport, and I have the duty to tell you that maybe there are other solutions. So when we want what we will do with fleets, and you say, okay, you put it, you stop buying it, Or, so you have proposed two solutions, and maybe I want to come back to, let's say, the multimodal approach and the change of behavior. So we can use the financial incentive to move from your car to shared mobility to these products, or to use a multimodal mix. So I think I feel the duty to bring you back to the whole, let's say, the whole picture. So quite often we promote, at least in DG Move, we promote, I would not pronounce it because it's a bad word, modal shift. We believe in the multimodal mix, and so maybe the solution is that you will not own a car, we will share cars, we will have less cars, or we will have more two-wheelers, clean two-wheelers. I don't think that the debate should be e-fuels or electric mobility. I think that we need to see how we can move in a sustainable way. And so it would be useful to have this systemic and holistic approach. I feel the duty to say it from the DG Move perspective.
But the shared car has to be fueled as well.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah.
But then,
for the public transportation system.
But I feel that we are talking about the same situation, but we change the energy source, and we believe that we will move in another way.
Okay, fine with me.
Very good. Shortly, I'm going to open the floor to questions in the room. Maybe just one more question on the swappable batteries, especially. There appears to be a need, obviously, for standardization, but also the need for infrastructure. Can you talk to us about the status of where you are with the swappable batteries consortium? How far away are you from making it a part of this future mix?
Yes, thank you. First of all, yes, indeed, you understand from what I said before, but also my previous intervention, that in the system approach, in fact, we are trying to cover multiple, let's say, challenges. And one of the challenges is also to try to propose some unified solution for, let's say, providing the users and consumers with solutions that will work for many different brands and models, etc., etc. And to do so, the best manner, of course, is to move to standardized solutions, or even partial solutions, of course. And to move to standardized solution, it means all the different players, stakeholders, need to agree on common specifications. That's what we are doing. And for the moment, within this consortium, as I said before, we identified the relevant technical specification, design specification that will ensure this interoperability, but also compatibility. Of course, safety, security is always a must, but in addition to that. And we cover so far, we agreed among the different partners about more than 80% of the specification we identified as necessary. So we are progressing well. At the same time, we have now, because we apply for that, formal liaison with SEN and SENELEC, and we participate to the development, as such, of the standardization activities in the dedicated technical committees. We are doing the same for the moment with the global standardization, ISO and IEC, and the progress is really significant. We were able to have this type of liaison to feed activities in that sense. I was referring before to these alternative fuel infrastructure regulations. SENELEC is waiting, expecting important inputs from our side to deliver something in support of this request from the Commission. Again, where these pieces of legislation boost a bit what we need to do. What is also very important and a big challenge is to understand the expectation from the users, and especially from not only the users of the vehicle itself themselves, but also from the cities and local authorities. And for that reason, we approach these the cities also, not only directly as such, but through standardization activities where there are strong expression of interest from the cities to move to other systems that multiplication of plugging plots everywhere in the cities. We have seen that it's not so efficient. And our swappable battery solutions or systems shows a lot of interest from the cities level. We also have a very good opportunities now. It's through these European Horizon Europe calls for the frugal zero emission vehicle concepts, this 2.0 partnership, where there is also extremely interesting opportunities to bring together all the actors and stakeholders from the value chain in a partnership. With this, we will understand what are the expectations. We will be also in a position to motivate urban planners to include in their planning, in the sustainable urban planning strategies and roadmap, to integrate this type of solutions. Otherwise, because it will take years before it will be in place, but then it will last for decades. So we have to give them all the mature information that will bring trust in including these type of infrastructures in their plan. And so that's where we are now. It's progressing well, as I said, but of course there are lots of ingredients we need to tackle. The Horizon Europe calls, or series of calls, will very certainly be an excellent opportunities. Many of our members from these component of the value chain, as I said, are already interested in trying to bring some ideas.
Thanks very much, Bernard. So I think we've covered a lot of ground so far on the industry's vision for decarbonisation. We'd like to indeed open the floor to questions from the audience, also online. And if you can just introduce yourself, who you're coming from, and who your question is to.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Lorena Anita. I'm the Deputy Head of Unit of the Mobility Unit in DG Grow. So we look after automotive, motorcycles, shipping, and rail competitiveness. So first to say that I enjoy very much the debate, very lively, very refreshing. I had to choose what I say now and what I ask because I would have a lot of things to add and to ask. But first, on Mr. Gluck on Euro 7, because it's in my unit, so I can reply and diffuse any doubts about Commission intentions. So Euro 7 also, well, to begin with, the internal combustion vehicles will stay on the market after 2035. So it's useful to regulate the emissions from them. We will also regulate for the first time emissions from brakes and tires. And also it applies to electric vehicles because we have requirements on battery durability. So I wanted to clarify on Euro 7. I have two questions, if I may, or at least one, because we spoke a lot about e-fuels. And we have heard about the business case. And I wanted to ask more about it on the demand side. We have heard that, okay, what we need is ramping up production. Maybe regulatory framework which incentivizes, because you gave the example of 10 years ago where the regulation didn't care about the business case for batteries and we went ahead. But we also speak to a lot of industries because we cover the whole mobility ecosystem. So some OEMs say there is no business case because of low energy efficiency, because of the price, and why divert investments from batteries and all these investments, and these are long-term horizon investments. But we also heard shipping industry or maybe aviation. Aviation is not in my unit, but we know if fuel can be for a solution for sectors which are more difficult to decarbonize. But I haven't heard a lot about the demand. You said that if we don't do something, the e-fuels will be produced somewhere else with the IRA, for example, in the US. How about the demand to have the business case? How do you see the demand in Europe? A second question, but it may be a lot. I would like to disconnect the second question from the first one. Regulation. We have heard what the regulation should not do, like say only incentivize one technology, and that we agree because in our legislation, technology neutrality is a principle. But what should regulation do? But let's be positive, and where do we need it in decarbonization and electrification? Thank you.
Thanks very much for the intervention from DG Grow and the questions. Maybe the first one on the e-fuels business case to Ralph, and then maybe also KTM, Piaggio, if you want to give a business perspective as well.
Very good question. Thank you very much. I mean, clearly the problem always is with new technologies, as long as you do not have the scale effects is the costs. So clearly, right now, e-fuels are, even with the relatively high oil prices we have and gas prices we have in place, are right now more expensive. That is why you need regulation at the end of the day. So I'm not saying, I never said that we don't need regulation at all. I just said I don't think we need necessarily subsidies in the first place, but to answer your question very easily, the Renewable Energy Directive, if you have a sub-quota, which the Commission actually proposed for hydrogen and e-fuels along all the transport sector, for example, will create a demand right away, because if mineral oil or energy providers, let's say energy providers, have to fulfill this sub-quota in 2030, everybody in the field knows that there will be a certain amount along the quota in the market definitely, and also the investors know that they can invest because they know there will be a market for that. As soon as we have the scale effects, I'm very sure that we will come closer and closer to business cases, because the costs will be competitive with fossil fuels from a certain day. Now, it's very difficult to tell when exactly that will be. We see this problem with the electrification as well. I always remember those charts with the downgoing battery costs constantly, and it was always said in 2025 there will be the even, and doesn't look like right now. So it's very difficult to predict exactly, but I really believe that there will be a market. In addition, we will have some kind of quotas for maritime and air transport, because it's very clear in those two fields we anyway will need liquid fuels from any kind, because it's not very likely that we will see other solutions there. There might be hydrogen solutions available in one day, but in general we will rely on combustion engine technology for a very long time. That of course creates also additional demand, and that is the kick-off. The alternative is you do the American way and you just give tax incentives. I know the problem is the European level cannot do that easily, because tax policy is in the hand of the member states mainly, but I really believe a push from the Renewable Energy Directive, having low taxes for those fuels in the first place would also of course help very much. At the end of the day, this could also go to a little higher taxation for fossil fuels, because we want to phase out fossil fuels at the end of the day. It's a kind of a CO2 pricing system as well. You could do that also, of course, via the emission trading system. But this is why I think the demand could come from. Maybe a last remark on the OEMs. I mean, clearly, if you have a regulation in place where you have to phase out the combustion engine, if I would be OEM in Europe, I would argue in the same way, because why should I invest €1 in a technology which I know in 2035, at least in Europe, is not in place anymore? But clearly, there's one problem: the by far highest, by far biggest sector in the transport area in terms of fuel consumption is, of course, road transport. If we exclude road transport from the beginning if we exclude e-fuels out of the road transport, we miss the opportunity to use the payment ability in the road transport, for example, via blending, to ramp up e-fuels much faster. That is why we believe that a ban of combustion engine in general is wrong. But if the political majority decides like it decides, then we have to create other tools there.
And on the OEM perspective, Michele, or?
Yep. My view on regulation is, first of all, I don't think that internal combustion engine is the devil and e-fuels and electric are Santa Claus. We have to be clear on that. Regulations are in place. I think you are doing a great job for our sector with the Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 5 Plus, will be Euro 6, will be Euro 7. And for a 0.8 problem, I think it's more than enough, because you are telling us what we have to do, And as you can see, we are doing far more than what you're asking. So I think we are doing a good job, us as OEMs and you as legislator, but I don't think we need nothing more. So rules are there, obviously must be respected. And I repeat, first of all, I think you have to take care about the 99% of the problem that is far away, a giant to be destroyed. We are doing what you tell us to do.
Yeah, I mean, answering your question about what is the right regulation, I think we need regulations for the entire community, otherwise we get lost. But and we learned out of the best that good regulations, smart regulations, they are supporting innovation in every field. And if they are wrong, as from my perspective, they are right now, they are stifling innovation, and we are not going ahead just only in one direction. I think we, as OEM, we emphasize a framework in this regulation where the technology openness for sake of the environmental sustainability is key. And I think it's part of the colleagues sitting here 500 meters away to come along with a good proposal. I think we as OEMs and the entire community, we are prepared to have this technical discussion, what is good, what is not good, and I think we should intensify this technical discussion much more, and it's not time for dogmas, it's time for solutions. This is my wish.
Maybe Eric, Mark? Yeah.
Yeah, one thing about Euro 7, and I think that DG Grow is making the right call to also regulate the tire and the brake emission. And if we all know, in my motorcycles and car, you have, when you brake, you are, in an electric motorcycle or car, you're using regenerative braking. So you're not braking on the brakes, you're braking on your engine, and emission is much lower, and that is really good for the environment because you don't have the emission. The same basically also applies for the tires. You have less tire emission when you use regenerative braking. And there are some research reports now coming out looking at that, and they see that emissions from electric cars are also lower on the brakes and the tires than compared to combustion engines. Then back to your suggestion about what is the right way to regulate, what is the right way to do this. I always believe, I think technology neutral, being technology neutral is of course the key of it. But I would say it should be positive for the benefit of the citizens, for the benefit of the motorcycle drivers, for the benefit of the car drivers, for the benefit of multimodality. And then I think it's really good to make sure that it is supporting in a positive way the right behavior. And not only, and that is sometimes costly, but I think it's to help this snowball start rolling, and then it will continue itself. I think the right regulation is a positive regulation that you are, I think, already working on and putting forward. Thank you.
I'd like to see if there's any more questions from the group, just while we pass the microphone there. Did you want to add, wanted to add one thing, Ralph?
One sentence about the business cases, if I may, because it's of course not only about regulation. You have this plant which is just built up in Chile, for example, right now from the company HIF, which is a member of the e-fuel alliance. Why is this plant built up? Because Porsche decided to offer their customers who own a Porsche with combustion engine e-fuels to run their cars climate neutral. This can be also a business case for a production without any regulation. If Maersk decides to order 12 ships based on methanol, then of course that is itself quite enough to start a methanol production and to gain also scale effects here. So it's not only the regulations, it can be also done in a different manner, but of course when you want to reach the goals quicker, then at the end of the day you would need regulation, I would assume.
I think another question from the back of the room. You have the microphone. Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Matteo Brumati. I work for Regione Piemonte. It's a northwest region in Italy. I'd like to draw the attention on the fact that on a part of EU legislation that it's often forgot or considered like a minor brother, actually, has Euro 7 proposal demonstrates, that it's air pollution. So while the emission from two wheels represent just a low percentage of the total EU emission, in some case they can represent a problem for the air quality in some areas. So I'd like to underline the fact that every step to decarbonization should go together with the aim of the quality of air, actually. So emissions are not just CO2. There is a lot more beside.
Thank you very much. Any reaction, comment on that? Mr. Gluck?
Right place, right vehicle, right energy carrier. I believe this should be the key approach. So, for example, if you take a look at the area where I come from in southern Germany, this is a very, very rural country, so a rural countryside. So distances are quite long. We don't have so much the problem of air quality because we don't have this high density of traffic. So I believe also here we have to see the different circumstances and we have to see different technological solutions. On one hand, different technologies. On the other hand, always when I hear about NOx, for example, yes, this is an issue. It's a major issue, especially in modern internal combustion engines, because the burning temperature is so much higher. So then there is NOx coming out. It hasn't been so much like in older engines, okay. But also our engineers found very good and solid solutions to that. So, for example, AdBlue. So all I want to say is, I don't want to say there is no challenge, but all I say that all the challenges we faced in the past, your engineers found solutions. And so because of that, I really appreciate that you say, you know, you are not against the Euro regulation like Euro 5, 6, 7, whatever, because it's a challenge and you will find solutions to this. I just see the problem that, you know, when we cap, when we say de facto it's kicking out one technology, then I see the problem, because then there is no solution. Then there is no progress, at least not in this field. Then we will lose a whole sector on this. And this for me, this is a problem. And by the way, just because you were asking before, what can we as politics do to initiate e-fuels, for example? Maybe sometimes we shouldn't do something. Maybe we should sometimes not do something. So, for example, today there was like this leak coming from the Commission on a delegated act on additionality. I believe additionality is a huge problem if you actually force everyone who wants to operate an electrolyzer, that you actually say you're only supposed to run this by green electricity only. Don't get me wrong, I love green electricity, no doubt about that. But you know, already to start with green electricity only kind of makes it really, really difficult to start something like e-fuels, because e-fuels need hydrogen, and we should have a hydrogen scale up. And then we should, in a second step, look for we only want green electricity there, but you know, sometimes we should ask ourselves the question, maybe not doing something is the solution, maybe sometimes not doing something could be another solution.
Antonio, you wanted to add something on the air pollution?
Because I think there should be room for more questions. It was mentioned before by DG Grow that we have been working on Euro 1 to Euro 5, and we are, as Michele was saying, also looking at further improvements to come. So clearly with that in mind, we reduced by plus 95% the local pollutants that have been reduced, and obviously you can also look at a smaller vehicle will in general be performing better because it has less mass to move around. So even there will be benefits from using those. I would say the key there is how to encourage fleet renewal. And so the new models, the new products that are on the market should remain attractive for the customer to buy, because no matter what new product we're talking about, it is bound to be cleaner than the one the user has been using. So if that renewal is encouraged, you will always get improvements. So,
I think we had Isabel, and then I think there was another question over there.
If I may add something which might not be shared in this room, is that you have also, as a region and as an authority, you can also use the urban vehicle access regulations, and you can choose the one which are most polluting to phase them out. We have the situation with some car, let's say, or vehicle. Also, motorcycle, it depends on the city. So I think that in terms of incentive, we have plenty of incentive, and the authorities sometimes they have the tools to do it.
Question then from the room.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. My name is Pablo Mendoza. I'm representing ACC, the Association for Emission Control by Catalyst. And I can say I fully agree with the comments so far regarding the challenges that pose Euro 5, Euro 4, Euro 5, Euro 6, Euro 7. Of course, we are ready for it. We are ready to support the Commission, and not only the Commission, but also the OEMs to tackle these emissions further. But coming back to the point about the CO2, I would like just to make a remark from the comments of MEP Gluck. Let's perhaps not look at 2026, where we will have perhaps a new legislature and then a new commission as well. Let's perhaps have an example that we will have in our hands at the beginning of next year, and that's the CO2 review for heavy-duty vehicles. And perhaps that would be a good opportunity to see how this develops. But even perhaps a question for you specifically, because from your political group, we had a rapporteur for the CO2 for cars and vans. And would you think that even at the beginning of next year, will we have a better split in terms of support, technology neutrality, even in your own political group? So that's the question.
It is always hard to say something, and it's even harder to say something regarding the future. So, of course, there has been a rapporteur in my political group, Renew Europe, and it is no secret that I don't really agree with him in all terms. Normally, we have a very, very good cooperation, not in this issue. He has a name which sounds pretty much the same than yours, and actually, he also when he's talking, he's almost the same. So it has to do something with your name. I don't know. No? I'm kidding. No. When it comes to heavy-duty vehicles, I believe this is a very, very interesting question, because I believe the technological hurdles of full electrifying heavy-duty vehicles is way too high. I believe that also the Commission sees the necessity for a technological neutral approach, including internal combustion engines, maybe in combination with climate neutral, CO2 neutral e-fuels. So I believe it will. I don't believe that that history really repeat itself, like from the cars and vans to the heavy-duty vehicles. I believe the come out will be a little bit different. Of course, I cannot talk for everybody in my group, and what you need to understand, maybe also for our parliamentary work, of course, we are working together in one group, but we also come from different member states, and so we don't get rid of our where we come from. Right? So of course, in political groups, you have different opinions on certain topics, which is very, very normal. Yeah, this time I was in the minority. It doesn't really feel like fun, but you know, I'm working on it so that I be part of the majority more often. And so this is what I can just tell you what I'm fighting for, and I've already fought for this for cars and light-duty vehicles, and I will of course also fight for technological neutrality, including internal combustion engine when it comes to heavy-duty. But at the same time, I have to say, I want CO2 neutrality then we have to find other solutions. So, for example, synfuels, because please don't see me as a brake when it comes to climate protection. Huh? I'm really ambitious on this. I really want climate protection. I also want that we are a climate neutral continent in 2050. I appreciate the goal of being climate neutral. What gives me a headache is not the goal. What gives me a headache is the way.
Thanks very much. We're just coming towards the top of the hour, so any final burning questions from the group? If we can bring the microphone down towards the front, please.
Hello, Chris Hodder from the International Motorcycling Federation. We've heard a lot about vehicles, but I'd be quite interested to know about the infrastructure requirements for the vision for decarbonisation and whose responsibility is to deliver it.
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I can. What I think is very, and you're right, let's talk about motorcycles and let's talk about charging them in the right way. And I think there with AFIR and with the work that Ismail Ertug, a colleague, MEP of the people here is doing, are moving in the right direction. Then when we look at DG Move, the Commission is moving in the right direction. We have to make sure that motorcycles can charge at the same points where cars can charge. And the more motorcycle and car motorcycle charging points can be, the better it is. And it should be in rural places as well. And that's where probably the incentives and the push from the European Commission is very important, because there the money earned back possibility is lower. So there we should have European regulation, making sure that in every city, also in Bulgaria, Romania, you can charge, and also in countryside. Of course, there will be commercial opportunities enough around the TEN-T network, the highways for the motorcycles to charge on commercial outlets, but it's very important and good you mention it.
Good question. From a manufacturer point of view, I need to split my answer into two technical directions. One is for the urban mobility, where we think the low voltage solution is it needs to go also cost-wise. You don't need the big performance, so it'll be not high voltage. For the higher performance vehicles, it must be high voltage. And I hear what you're saying. The fast charging possibilities for cars will not allow a fast charging for a 48 volt powered two-wheeler. So technically, yeah. Okay. So this is an issue, and therefore we need the infrastructure from our perspective in the urban area, in particular for the powered two-wheelers. And I have my doubts that we are restricted now for the fast charging for the passenger cars, that we will get the infrastructure for the two-wheelers. So I think I like to have it, but I don't see it. So somebody needs to invest somehow, or in other words, the swappable battery could be the only way to go forward to be fast enough in the charging in the cities. And it's not only a European issue. Just go to India, yeah, go out of the airport, and you see that people are hooking the electricity to their houses just by wire. I can't imagine big public charging stations there. Yeah, so big issue. No solution.
The good thing about e-fuels is once they are produced, you don't need a new infrastructure.
Yeah. That's true.
Any other comments?
Just a quick point also to your question, interesting question. Indeed, from the city's perspective, there is a strong request for bringing some relevant solutions, and not only in Europe, worldwide. I'm chairing the activities for smart cities at standardization level, and we have some numerous demand from cities to try to develop something in support of these type of infrastructures. We also have at European level, I was referring several times to the alternative fuel infrastructure regulations. There are some key, let's say, strategies or visions, but also roadmaps regarding the infrastructures for e-mobility, not only for two-wheelers or light category vehicles, heavy-duty vehicles, also for the maritime, even for maritime. And after that, we also have the aviation. So there will be a need for a multiplication of infrastructures. There will very certainly be, will be a need to have a common understanding and management of these different infrastructures, because behind that there is some supply. But there are a lot of things ongoing, and now there is probably a need to merge different subsectors together for having a kind of systemic approach between the sectors.
So thanks very much for the questions in the room, online, and for all the contributions of all the panelists. I'd like to pass the floor back to Antonio to wrap up and draw some conclusions on the motorcycle industry's vision for decarbonisation.
Thank you, Alid. Before anything else, congratulations on managing this discussion, which has been, I hope, for everybody as interesting as I found it myself. For those of you that were here last year, we struggled a lot because we started looking at the whole vision of the industry and we ended up discussing only decarbonization. So that was interesting. If I go back to today's event, we focus on decarbonization, and we struggled in talking almost about power two-wheelers most of the time, because we ended up talking about electrification, e-fuels, big challenges. So this is not a surprise. I'm not surprised. I think it shows to what extent we are relying a lot on what other sectors will be able to bring to the table. And this is a fundamental element. We are a small sector, by no means a sector that cannot contribute to improving sustainable mobility. If you can bring on the screen the vision slide, please, the one with all the aspects. So also serving the citizen in a better way, serving political aspirations at all levels, including the cities, of course, but not only, mitigating climate change, but obviously also improving safety of the vehicle. So you can see there's a lot of things we're working on, because those are all the elements that make up what sustainable mobility is. And obviously, as a small sector, we have, of course, less means than what the automotive at large, the car industry has. We are also a much smaller part of the problem, and we identified we're actually part of the solution. This is the bit which I would hope everybody can take back. At least that's the part that I take back, a confirmation of what we've been doing being the correct thing. We talk about in decarbonization multi-pathway, because at the end of the day, we will be depending on progress on batteries, availability of e-fuels, the charging infrastructure being there, the cities thinking about two-wheelers in the first place, where that is not always a given. But if that happens and we basically have those solutions available, there's a guarantee here that we are basically able to step forward already today with many of these solutions, improving what is existing, making sure the internal combustion engine is able to continue improving on decarbonization, and not only, also on air quality, making sure we can develop more interesting electric products in the future, more affordable for the consumer, which at the end of the day is a fundamental element also in the equation. And that brings me to the last point. Of course, in doing this effort, and I think our president, Michele Colaninno, was hinting that in the beginning, we represent jobs, employment in the sector directly, but also, if you like, indirectly involved in manufacturing that is involved in motorcycling at large. And we want to continue doing that, making sure we can continue to support those jobs being created, new jobs coming, of course. And that's another element of sustainability, of course, as an industry which you need to ensure looking forward. So we didn't have time to talk about aspects such as reskilling of jobs. These are fundamental challenges that are there. which we are tackling irrespective of the small size that is in the sector. So with that, I just want to say that I don't know what the theme will be for next year, probably another aspect of the vision. I hope you enjoyed the event as I did. I would like to thank you all in the panel for sharing your expertise and bringing your passion for many of the topics you are basically defending. And also for those in the room that stayed with us and those online for bringing your contribution to the discussion, which I'm sure there will be a need for also in the future to continue making progress. So thank you all, safe journey back, and given we're approaching Christmas, all the best for the end of the year. Thank you. Now there's a networking coffee for those that need some.